Hi, it's Dennis Daly. I've posted over 100 excerpts from some of my more than 250 American montage shows that I did in the 1980s and 90s while at UPI Radio. Recently, I embarked on a fresh series of shows, and here's the second half of one of my new American montage interviews. Welcome back. My guest who joins us from Chicago is farm broadcaster Max Armstrong. We were talking about the legacy of Paul Harvey, who, of course, also lived in Chicago. And Max says that Harvey was not only listened to by everyone, but worked very, very hard at what he did.
Paul was so closely followed, of course, and had such a tremendous reputation. He deserved every bit of it. He worked very hard. I'll be honest with you, going down the Eisenhower Expressway in Chicago some mornings at 4 o'clock in the morning, as I was headed toward the WGN studios on North Michigan, I would see this vehicle with a license plate PH-ABC. And most of the time, Paul was in the back seat as his driver would take him. But I would also tell you that within 3 years before his passing, I did see Paul driving himself in one morning of the Eisenhower Expressway. But he was legendary all over the country, as you know. I still talk with some degree of regularity with his longtime engineer, Bill Carambellis. Bill engineers all of the Notre Dame football games every weekend. You'll hear his name mentioned some. It was a very powerful personal loss for Bill and others who worked with Paul. And I think it was Paul's dream. He would love to have had Paul Jr. continue on and do the radio broadcast. And the way it was explained to me was that Paul Jr. was not a morning guy. He was not a morning person. He didn't want to get up early and go through that very difficult routine that his father had gone through for those decades.
Well, you talk about a chip off the old block. A lot of people said that Paul Jr. tried too hard to sound like his dad. I never felt that way. And the other thing a lot of people don't know is that he wrote those rest of the stories for his dad.
Precisely. In fact, he won several awards for doing that. Now, he would have people who would help him research them, but he actually did write them. What a lot of people don't realize, too, about Paul Jr. is he's a composer. That's
and a concert pianist.
Absolutely.
Too, yeah. I remember quoting many times a sentence Paul wrote. Now, this was part of a commercial. You have to realize he's selling something here. And I called up the radio station and I said, "Do you have a tape of the newscast?" "Oh, yeah, we delay it. I want a copy of it." He was for a while sponsored by a group called the Electric Information Institute, which was an umbrella group for atomic energy. And here was the sentence. Now, Max, this was a commercial. "The next time you see high voltage lines braced against a streaked and stormy sky, remember that they are bringing electricity from some distant point where it is made to some other place where it turns off the darkness." Isn't it lovely?
Yeah, he had it.
I get misty-eyed just reciting that, because here's a man who was so poetic. I mean, nearly everything he said was deserving of being put in a poetry book somewhere.
And he was so effective in and around holidays. I mean, that's one thing that you'll recall is he was talking about mother, he was talking about your father, everybody's father, or close to Thanksgiving. Certainly, he was so reverent toward our veterans and the sacrifices that they've given our nation. And it's things like that that I remember the most about Paul.
And he was honest about his feelings. I know during Vietnam, he was such a hawk. And then as the war progressed, he changed.
That's correct.
And he one time dressed down Billy Graham on the air, telling him basically, stay out of politics. And, that took guts.
It did, but he and Billy went way back, you may recall. In the western suburbs of Chicago, when Billy was a young preacher, he had the opportunity to minister to a young radio man by the name of Paul Harvey.
Let's talk about a fellow with whom you will always be linked, and that is Orion Samuelson. If ever a person had a jovial, rich voice, but was able to articulate it, it is Orion. Tell those people who've never heard the name before what Orion is to farmers in this country?
Well, he is the most legendary agriculture broadcaster in America. I mean, he's been on the air here in Chicago for over 50 years, on the air in a major market, talking about agriculture. And I've hung out with him doing our broadcast together now. Well, I've been with him 34 years. Our desks about 10 feet apart for many of those years. His mind is still sharp as a whip, and he absorbs all that's going on in terms of politics and international affairs, and is a very fine podium speaker. I'd like to think I've been able to absorb a little bit from him during those years, and I've been very proud when occasionally he would quote me or use some sentence that I had shared or some fact or statistic. But he has helped encourage consumers all across America to really understand and appreciate agriculture. And that's becoming even more of a challenge with each passing day as consumers get farther and farther away from the farm. There was a time when we all had an almost direct connection to agriculture in this country. Few of us do anymore, and few of us produce all the food for the rest of us.
Max, I know over the years you've had the amount of broadcast time cut back on the air. And I know that in many markets, there's almost no farm broadcaster on the air anymore. And quite often, the stations have said, well, the ratings are bad, or we don't have enough listeners during the noon hour. And I know that happened to you over the years in Chicago.
We think that there were poorer programming decisions that drove away more listeners than our broadcast. And we made a conscientious effort, Dennis, to try to reach out in the midst of agriculture programming to make it understandable and appreciated by the people in town, by explaining to them what those circles are that you look down and you see from the plane as you're traveling over Kansas in an airplane, or why we talk about the pork belly of the hog. That was long traded in the futures market in Chicago. It isn't anymore, but we'd explain that it was uncured, unprocessed bacon. And these questions would come in, and we'd explain them on the air. The legendary Bob Collins, our morning man at WGN, would call back to me on the air. He'd pick up the phone. I'd hear the dial tone, and I knew it was coming to my desk. He'd say, I need the cow desk. I need an answer to this question. And it would make you keep on your toes. And it was humbling, I must say. But we had a very unique opportunity, and we still do through our broadcast in Chicago, to explain things to people about this industry that touches all our lives. And as Orion has said so often, he may have told you when you two visited, if you eat, you too are involved in agriculture.
Yes, that was a great phrase he came up with. Now, in an era where even the smallest farmer has a computer now and may have a satellite dish, what type of services out there on the Internet are broadcasters such as you doing?
Well, there's more of it available out there, and we can continue to talk about more Internet delivery to that farmer. The reality of it is, though, that computer isn't yet in the pickup truck. It isn't yet the Internet access and the combine cab. However, it will soon be. In just a matter of months, I would suggest to you, it won't be long before all of that will be coming right into the combine cab. So it's not as readily available as over-the-air radio just yet. But that said, our broadcasters are doing more. We're utilizing more means of communication, whether it's YouTube or Internet broadcasting or satellite television. Orion and I are on the satellite, coming into the farms and ranches all over America every weekend on TV. I was in Nashville doing a live show on RFD TV just last week, taking calls from listeners, talking about the health of horses, for example. I'll be flying down to Nashville to do another one next month. There are just so many different venues where now we reach farmers. And I would have to say that more and more our ag broadcasters are being entrusted with very difficult and serious messages in a very conflicted and competitive media climate. By that, let me explain. There's so much misinformation about agriculture. That's always been the case, but I think it's more so than ever before. So much misunderstanding about how our food is produced. And so there are groups who say, we need you as a broadcaster, as you understand what we do and why we do it, to help us carry this message. Just last month, I hosted an Internet coast-to-coast television hookup Washington, D.C., New York, University of California, Davis, and I was on a big dairy farm in northwestern Indiana where 32,000 cows are milked, but we had a 3-camera shoot. I was hooked up all over the country, and I was the moderator of the Midwest version of this. Again, because the farm broadcaster, and it's not just a Max Armstrong thing or an Orion Samuelson thing, but throughout our profession, Dennis, I think there's a respect because we do have the knowledge of food production and can convey that story.
I learned so much in the 6 years I was at the USDA. And you know, people will say, oh, those sloppy farmers, oh, the processors, there's junk all over the place. Well, the big thing to me, the story that needs to be told, is we haven't had foot and mouth disease in this country since the 20s. Canada's had it. It was rampant in Mexico. And it's because the rules that are in place, port inspection, meat inspection, but more than that, trying to educate the producer as to what diseases look like before their veterinarian even sees diseases. And in the case of foot and mouth, for example, it looks like a venereal disease. Is it contagious equine metritis? I'm trying to remember the name of the disease that can look the same in horses. And most of the time, if you just de-stress the animal, it'll get well. And we always had the fear that it would be foot and mouth and the farmer wouldn't do anything about it. For the layman, there was a grave concern during the time the Haitian boat people were coming into the south, into Florida, and drug runners, that there would be people who would bring food with them to eat naturally, or a light plane would crash, and there would be unprocessed sausage on board, and there are something like 2 million free-roaming pigs in the state of Florida, and deer, that once you get a disease like that in the country, you have the biggest search and destroy mission you've ever seen, and hamburger would be $30 a pound. So there are some major ongoing victories because of vigilance. And I compliment you because I like to think education plays the major part in that.
Well, I could easily digress here, but I think one thing that comes to mind, by all means, Dennis, is how safe our food supply is. You know, the recent instance of the cantaloupe listeria contamination has been high profile. It's been tragic. We've seen the loss of life and food contamination. E. coli, for example, it can be very devastating to the young and old. But when you put it all together, now any illness and any death should be taken seriously, but consider this. We serve what? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 million meals a day in America for our 312 million people. Think of how magnificent this food machine is to deliver this volume, this value, and to do it so safely.
Absolutely. I heard somebody the other day say worldwide a jet plane 24 hours a day takes off every 4 seconds. Now, we have major plane crashes now and then, but when a plane goes down, you'd think it was the end of the world.
Precisely.
Yeah. And it's the same way with food. We in this country do something, or we have the luxury of doing something that most people around the world don't, and that is we don't think twice about what we eat or where it came from.
I think those of us who have traveled internationally really come home with that appreciation, too, especially when you get to a third world nation and you see the food displayed right out there next to the street and the flies
with
that
the
are
flies on it, yeah, and the dogs up against it.
Yeah, by all means. So,
Max, you may not want to get into this, but what is your feeling about dogs in restaurants and around food? I am a non-dog person, and I just have to grit my teeth sometimes.
Oh, I can understand that fully. Well, you know what? I'm a dog person. I love my Jack Russell Terrier. He's my best buddy. He'll get in the chair and, nestle right up next to me. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't want him around my food. I don't want anybody else's dog around my food as well. I think there are reasons we have rules in our restaurants, and restaurateurs, of course, are concerned about food safety as well. They have to be, because an outbreak, any kind of an outbreak traced back to their facility could put them out of business. The cantaloupe industry in Colorado right now is putting into effect a whole new scheme of auditing on-farm inspections, training of workers, so they can hopefully, if not market a crop next year, then certainly do so the year after. And it is possible, after a high-profile food contamination instance to spring back. And a perfect example is our peanut industry in the United States. We had a devastating outbreak of a peanut contamination just a couple of years ago. People stopped eating peanuts. We were told to take the peanut butter off our shelves. And guess what? That market is hot as a pistol. The peanut growers, I was in a field in Georgia, southern Georgia, not far from the Florida state line, just about 2 weeks ago out there with a producer, and he was smiling because not only has the acreage been reduced and the drought reduced the crop in some places this year, but the consumption of peanut butter has risen 20% over the past 3 years put together. So you can spring back from something like that.
By the way, one line I heard concerning dogs was a commentary where a fellow said, you know, the person with the dog in the restaurant may think that dog is the center of their universe. Well, it's not the center of mine.
Precisely. I hear what you're saying, Dennis.
Max, a few more things as we wrap up here. What is the status of the family farm? I mean, it's easy to look at ConAgra and all those companies and say, well, there are no mom and pop farms left. One area, if I may interject here, even though it's getting conglomeratized, if I may make up a word, is wine country in California, where you still see these individual little wineries. That's mom and pop to me. But what about the other crops?
It's one of the most rampant misunderstandings of agriculture. One of the most common misconceptions, to tell you the truth, Dennis. This business about corporate America taking over family farms. It just isn't so. 94% of our farms in America, 94% of them are owned by family farmers. And a lot of people are stunned to hear that because they think that big corporations are coming in and muscling their way in. The fact is, now many of these farms are incorporated because of the tax structure in this country. But when you look at that corporation, it's a mom and dad, their sons, those sons' spouses. It may be a daughter who's running part of the cattle enterprise. They may meet every Monday as the executives of that corporation, if you will, and they do so around the kitchen table. But it's very much family-driven, family-operated. Now, true, many of them are growing in size because of the economies of scale, allowing them to produce more efficiently as the cost of their inputs, such as fuel and fertilizer and seed and equipment, continue to climb. But these are very much family businesses.
Max, one final thing. When you were sitting there in that farmhouse in southern Indiana, did you think that somebody would have you on the line for an hour talking about your career?
No, and especially not the guy that I listened to coming out of Vincennes, Indiana on my radio in the old farmhouse. And you know what? One more thing you might find kind of amusing. I still have that old farmhouse and I still do some of my radio broadcasts out of that same room that was my bedroom right there next to the closet. And I just find it's a funny thing to be able to go back in there. But, it reminds me poignantly of mom and dad who enabled me to live my dream, to be able to, I'm sure Dad would have rather had me on the farm those weekends when I was driving over across the river to work at the nearby radio station, and they'd probably rather had me in Sunday school when I left to go across there on Sunday mornings to run that station. But they knew it was my dream. It was my passion. And the truth is, I never missed a day of Sunday school until I got into radio. That was the beginning of the end, I guess, Dennis.
Well, if you were like me, though, working Sunday mornings at a radio station, every half hour with the different religions broadcast, you felt you went to Sunday school, but you didn't know whether you were going to heaven or hell by the time the morning was over.
You hit the nail on the head, because truly, I was exposed to a wider variety of denominations. A couple of those were remote broadcasts that I brought in on telephone lines, and in one instance, the minister came out to the station. He was the only person I would see all day long, but he would come out. Reverend Theron Arnold was his name, and he would come out to the station and he would say, "Max, if you could find George Beverly Shea, I would also like for you to play Anita Bryant before you introduce me." And, I would have them all lined up on the turntable. Sure. The kid who had done this before I got to the station would play rock and roll before he came into the Baptist Hour. No, I didn't. I lined up.
You were a good boy.
I lined up Tennessee Ernie Ford, or one of the other greats with a hymn to bring the right atmosphere to the Baptist Hour. Brought to you by the First Baptist Church.
I was talking to the people at the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church the other day about interviewing their current day radio minister, and I told them, I said, I could not wait to hit the button on the turntable at 9:30 and hear that fellow, I can't think of his name now, at Brentwood Studios in St. Louis singing, "Bringing Christ to the Nations, the Lutheran Hour." And it was Reverend Oswald Hoffman who was the radio minister. But we had every conflicting idea of heaven presented on Sunday morning.
Well, the way we brought it all together by the end of the broadcast day, and this station was a daytime-only station, and we had to push the plunger on the transmitter at local sunset so that the other stations could have priority over the channel. But we signed off with the Lord's Prayer. We signed on with our national anthem in the morning, but I would read the sign off of the station, inviting listeners to join us again tomorrow morning as we serve you in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. And then, good night, and I would play Jim Neighbors singing the Lord's Prayer. And so the moment that he finished, Amen, right on the money, as that second hand hit at the top of the hour, I hit the plunger and took the station off the air. Well, no. In this case, it was an AM, and I cleared the way for WSAI Cincinnati to come blasting in over the speaker.
Yeah, there are many cases of people who always have a signal. There was a great station on the same frequency as WWL in New Orleans in Texas. They would sign off and say, "It's 7 o'clock," and hit the transmitter, and you'd hear CBS News from WWL, so they never lost a listener. Max, last thing, what would you say to some young fellow or girl sitting on the floor in their bedroom, holding a flashlight, pretending it's a microphone, with a dream of being on the air in this world where there is less and less radio?
People have asked me that in recent days, saying you really wouldn't encourage anybody to get in this business, would you? You know what? I would say go in with your eyes wide open by all means, but if this is a passion for you, there is a way to realize that passion. Just believe in what you want to do and don't give up. I remember when it came time to graduate from college, I was sending out tapes and letters, and they were being turned down, but I didn't give up. I kept exploring all of the avenues, using every contact that I knew to try to get into this business. I would further say, carve yourself a niche, and I tell that to farmers too, Dennis. I say, find something you can do. Do it better than the guy who has the farm down the road or that other kid in your class who wants to be on radio or television. Now, true, sportscasters, it could be said, I suppose, they're a dime a dozen. A lot of people want to be in that business. Not so many people want to be the weather expert, the economics expert, and certainly the agriculture expert, understandably. But if you carve out a niche where you have a level of expertise there, that makes you far more valuable. And that could be said, I guess, about politics, international affairs. As this world is getting smaller and smaller, knowing what's going on the other side of the world, I think is even more important. But I use the perfect example of my friend Tommy Skilling. Tom started at WGN Chicago about 6 months after I did, working as a weatherman. I used to fill in for him about 10 nights a year back in those early days when he was making the transition to computer graphics. But Tom, as a boy, was so enthralled with weather that it became his passion, and it still is. He eats, sleeps, and breathes weather. And to my knowledge, he's the highest paid local television weatherman in the United States.
Wow. Max Armstrong, thank you. You've got a lot of career left, but what you have done already is pretty darn exceptional.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. It's been exceptional for me because it's given me such a wonderful opportunity to just be a part of people's lives and to be invited into their homes. And we were talking about the farm broadcaster a little bit earlier, Dennis, and this is true. I mean, I was on a farm in Tennessee yesterday, southern Tennessee, never met the man before. He welcomed me in like I was family. He said, "Mr. Max, this is wonderful to have you here. Let's go have lunch." Just to be invited into their home, because we are regularly invited into their home, it's just such a treat. It's a thrill, and I know you've felt the same way, having the opportunity you've had in the broadcast industry too, Dennis.
Max Armstrong, thank you, and say hello to Orion.
I sure will. He'll be glad to hear from you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from my new American Montage series. Check out YouTube for more. I'm Dennis Daly.